Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. What's with the burning bush? And what secrets can we learn from the burning bush? So by the end of this year, I'm hoping to give you a really deep and profound understanding that we can get out of this incident that happens with Moshe and the burning bush. But before we start, let's go back and actually hear what happens with the burning bush. Okay, so Moshe is tending the flock of his father-in-law. Who's his father-in-law? Yitro. Okay, great. The priest of Midian. He drives the flock out into the wilderness, and they get to where? Where do they get to? Where do they get to?
Wait, what?
Where does this happen? Where does the burning bush story happen? Har Sinai. Okay, but what's it called? It's not Horeb. Horeb. Okay, great. So they get to the Mount of Horeb, the mountain of God. Okay, so this is actually Har Sinai, right? And an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. A bush in Hebrew is called a sneh, okay? It's a specific kind of thorny little sort of tumbleweed, right? Okay. So, and the angel of God appeared to him in the blazing fire out of the bush. And he gazed, and the bush was all inflamed, but the bush was not consumed. And Moshe said, I must turn aside and look at this marvelous sight. Why doesn't the bush burn up? And when Hashem saw that he had turned aside to look at it, Hashem called to him out of the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe. And Moshe responds, Hineni, because that's what you say when God calls your name. Right, okay. Hineni. And Hashem said to him, do not come closer. Remove your shoes from your feet, because the ground which you stand on is holy ground. Now, this is a super strange story, right? Why is God talking out of a bush? Why is that happening? Well, I mean, honestly, if you imagine that God's going to appear to Moshe Rabbeinu, do you really think it's going to be out of a burning tumbleweed? Really? B, why does the tumbleweed not get consumed? And why do we care? And why is that important? And why is that it's so important that Moshe, stops and has a second look at it? How does he even notice that? I mean, when you see a tree on fire, do you go, I'm wondering if it's being consumed? Do you analyze it, or are you just tree on fire, throw water on it? Moshe's response is tree on fire, let's stop and look at this marvelous sight. What? How did he even notice? And the other thing is when God sees that Moshe turns aside, he's oh, it's go time, let's talk, right? And he's Moshe, take off your shoes. You are on holy ground. What is it? Was it not holy before he turned aside? Why are we taking off our shoes? Why is it holy? Is it because of the bush? Is it because of God? What's going on? This incident is so strange. And this is the launching pad for Moshe's whole career as Shaliach of Am Yisrael, right? So this is where God's the whole burning bush thing happens, and then God's by the way, we're going to Egypt, we're getting the people up out of there, right? And then they have their whole discussion about Moshe says no, and Hashem says no, really, and Moshe says no, I can't talk, and he says who give you a mouth? Hush now, you're going down to Egypt, right? So this incident is the launching pad. It's super important, but what is going on? Okay, so what I want to try to understand in this shiur is what's going on with this incident. So I have a couple questions, right? The first question is, why the thorn bush? Okay? Rashi says, that the thorn bush was supposed to show Moshe that Hashem was with Bnei Israel in their suffering. That's what Rashi says. So I didn't understand what Rashi meant. Why would a thorn bush tell me that? Okay, so I had to go back to the Midrash that Rashi was quoting, which is Midrash Tanhuma. And what it says is, why did God appear in the midst of a bush of thorns instead of a big tree or in a column of smoke or something like that? The Holy One, blessed be He, said, I have stated in my Torah, I will be with him in his time of trouble. In Tehillim, it says, Imo anochi batzara, I'm with him in his trouble. So in so much that Bnei Israel was enslaved and they were suffering, Hashem appeared to Moshe in a bush of thorns, which is a place of suffering. Okay, do you guys ever remember watching those really old Disney cartoons? And there's Brer Rabbit. Ever heard of Brer Rabbit? Oh, Brer Rabbit. He gets chased by somebody and he's trying to run away, and so he jumps into a thorn bush to get saved, right? Why? Because the thorn bush, he had grown up there, but anybody else trying to get into a thorn bush, you're going to get stabbed. A lot. Prickly. So what's Hashem trying to say with this whole thorn bush thing is saying, like Am Yisrael is in a place of suffering, full of thorns, full of pokes, full of bleeding, full of pain, I'm with them in that. Like, it wouldn't be appropriate for him to be like in a giant cedar or like a beautiful column of smoke or like, I don't know, like a glorious shiny bubble, because like his people are suffering. You want to show that you're with them? Show something that causes suffering. Show something that's painful, a thorny bush, something lowly, right? Something low to the ground, tiny, kind of like, scraggly. Like, I'm with you in that, is what Hashem is saying. Okay? The other thing that they say about why a thorn bush, this comes from the Mizrahi, which is a commentary on Rashi, okay, which he's bringing another part of Midrash. And he says, what you should learn from the thorn bush is like this. She'en makom panui belo shechina ve'afilu b'snei. There is no place in the world without the Shekhinah in it, even a thorn bush. You'd think, okay, you see a beautiful, stately cedar, or you see like a cloud of smoke, and you're like, oh, obviously those are divine. God is everywhere. The Shekhinah, the presence of God, can be felt everywhere in our world, even in something as lowly as a thorn bush. It doesn't have to be these high, lofty, holy things. Even in a thorn bush can be the Shekhinah. Okay? The Midrash also says that we can learn some stuff about Am Yisrael from the thorn bush. Like, for example, a thorn bush has to have water to grow. Okay? Specifically, these are like those little like scrubby plants, like they grow like the side of a river, those like kind of like scrubby. And we're also in a desert area, right? So like there's a little bit of water, you get those like scrubby little plants, right? Okay? So just like a thorn bush needs water to grow, come on, fill in the blanks. Water is Torah. The thorn bush is the Jews. So the thorn bush needs water, so the Jews need the Torah. Okay, great, beautiful. And just like a thorn bush has both thorns and roses, so Am Yisrael also has tzaddikim and rashayim. It's not just one thing. We have beautiful flowers, and we also got some spiky, prickly kind of folks. I'm assuming we all have had that experience, yes? Okay, great. So we can see the thorn bush is teaching us that there's nowhere without God, that God is with us in our sorrow, that Am Yisrael is like a thorn bush in a couple ways, but like what's with the burning? Why is it on fire? And why is it not being burnt up, and why do we care? Okay, so this, the Sforno goes deep into. And what the Sforno says is like this. The thorn bush is a metaphor for Am Yisrael, right? And they are the messengers of God on earth. And they're surrounded by this fire. Okay? The Egyptians didn't see Am Yisrael as something holy, as something special. They saw them as like a big pile of prickly thorns, which you would set on fire, commonly. Okay? So Am Yisrael, for the midstream, for the Egyptians, looked like this pile of like whatever plant that I don't care about. But here's the thing, is that plant, when the fire came, wasn't consumed. The 10 plagues come down to Egypt, and Egyptians suffer. And what happens to the Jews? Nothing. The fire comes down, but the thorn bush is not consumed. The fire comes down, but the thorn bush isn't touched by it. The plagues hit Egypt, and you thought that this was a lowly, whatever, enslaved people. Yeah, well, they're lowly and enslaved, but the fire doesn't touch them. You're over there getting burnt to a crisp. And they are cool as a cucumber. Right? This is what Hashem was trying to tell Moshe. He's like, I'm going to bring a fire down. And I'm going to pull my people up out of there, but don't worry, they will not be consumed. The fire won't touch them. Okay? So the next thing that Sforno says is, okay, I get the fire, I get the metaphor, I get the Egypt right out, but why does the Torah stop and tell us that Moshe turned aside and have him wonder out loud, what is this marvelous sight? Right? Like, you could skip that. Right? Why does the Torah bring that? So the Sforno tells it like this. He says, when Moshe took a deeper interest in this phenomena, then God decided to appear to him to explain what was going on. This is in accordance with the idea that somebody who wants to purify himself, God extends a helping hand to help him. When Moshe gets curious and looks for the answers, Hashem appears to him and gives him the answers to his questions. But the first step was to recognize that something was going on. The first step was to look for an explanation. The first step was to be like, wait a minute, wait. Fire and bush, but the bush is not going to, this is weird. What? I'm going to stop and take a moment. Moshe recognized that something was going on. And because he had that awareness, Hashem was like, oh, you're aware? Then you deserve an answer. Let's talk. Rav Moshe Shapiro teaches that this burning thorn bush was actually a test for Moshe's leadership. He noticed a detail. A good leader notices details in the situation. Most people, when they're walking by a bush, would be like, oh my gosh, a burning bush! Fire! Ah! Right? That would have been the response. But Moshe's response was, okay, so there's a burning bush. Bush appears not to be consumed. Fire appears not to be going out. Let's analyze the situation. And that's the difference between a great leader and an average leader. An average leader is like, oh my gosh, there's a fire, there's fire! And then they freak out, right? And then they're like, oh my gosh, we need to have a meeting. Let's have a meeting, everybody. Right? But Moshe was like, okay, before we freak, before we go throwing water on everything, what's going on here? What's with this fire? What's with the bush? And he stopped and he noticed details. And then the next thing is what made him an excellent leader. And the next thing is what made him a leader for Am Yisrael. Right? An average leader freaks out and throws water on the bush. A better leader is like, let's stop and look at details. Moshe said, let's turn aside. What Moshe did was he turned and he went for a new perspective. He wanted to look at the same situation from a slightly different perspective to see what he could learn from that. And that's an excellent leader. Not only do you see a situation and you first realize what's the details and you analyze it and you try to figure out what's going on, but second, you take yourself out of the position that you were in and you move, you turn around and you see it from the different side to try to understand what's going on. You don't take things at face value the way you first saw it. You look at the situation and you look at the other side. And when Hashem saw Moshe do that, he said, this guy can lead Am Yisrael. He has the ability to look at a situation and not just take the first impression and run with it. Right? Because if the first impression, we're in real trouble. Because like we're in enslaved people in Egypt. Like this is not going to go well. Like I know I'm just going to walk up to Pharaoh and be like, hi, we're leaving. No. Like you need somebody who can look at the details of the situation, but also look at it from a different perspective. Look at people, not from the first impression, but also notice the details. Notice exactly what's going on. Don't just react. Think. Analyze. Look at it from a different way and then react. That's what makes a great leader. The other thing is that Moshe's turning aside wasn't only something he did at the burning bush. This idea of like turning and looking at something differently. The same thing happened when he was in Egypt. So the Midrash says like this, Moshe, when he would go out, he would recognize the burdens of his brothers. So he would see a large burden on a small person, or a small person like with a big burden, or a man's burden on a woman, or a woman's burden on a man, or an elderly person having the burden of a young man, and he would leave aside his rank. He would turn aside from being Prince of Egypt, right? And go and right their burdens and act like he was assisting Paro. He'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, clearly this is causing a problem with Paro's building project. I'm just going to move this burden over here to the correct person and move this back over here. Okay, great. Have a great day doing this for Paro because I'm doing it for Paro because I believe in Paro, right? When he turned aside, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, just like you turned aside from your business and saw the sorrow of Am Yisrael and acted towards them like a brother, I'm going to turn aside and I'll leave the upper realms and I'll come down to even a lowly thorn bush to speak to you. You brought yourself down to be with my people, to help them, to care for them. I'll bring myself down to speak to you. It's this idea of Moshe's ability. He was the most humble person who ever lived. So he had this ability to bring himself down. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu was like, you can bring yourself down, I can bring myself down. I can bring myself down to the lowliest bush and call out to you from a bush. Because you turn aside from yourself. You don't just stay in one spot and see things from one perspective. You move and you look at things in a different way. I can do the same. We can make a plan. We can bring the people out with this kind of work. So this is all really great and really, really nice. But I think there's something even deeper and even more mind-blowing. So this comes from the Netivot Shalom, which is one of my favorites. He's like all-star, okay? So this is how he puts all of these different things together, okay? The questions are, why a bush? Why a bush that is burning, that is not consumed? Okay, why does Moshe turn aside? Why holy ground? Okay, we're going to bring that all together in one explanation. Okay, so he says the way that you have to understand this starts with understanding the bush, understanding this tumbleweed, understanding this burning bush, by understanding how plants grow. Okay, what happens is you take a seed, you put the seed in the dirt, and then the seed starts to rot. Okay? It rots away until the very last tiny bit is left, and then it sprouts. It's this moment, says the Netivot Shalom, when the seed has completely rotted away, is completely destroyed except for one tiny bit, that's the moment of renewal. That's the moment that the plant can start to grow. Israel and Egypt can be compared to a plant right at that moment. We were on which level?
49.
The 49th level of Tumah, the 49th level of impurity, the 49th level of distance from God. When you hit 50, game over. You disappear. You stop existing. We were on the 49th level. The entire seed had rotted away. Everything was almost gone except for this one tiny little bit left, and that was the moment of renewal. Once we hit that point, once we hit that 49th level, we were ready for the renewal. We were ready to sprout. We were ready to grow. We had to go through that rot. The burning bush that is not being consumed, that bush is the symbol of that tiny bit of Israel still clinging to Torah, still clinging to purity, still clinging to Hashem, and surviving despite the burning fire of Egypt. Okay, so what's this tiny part? What's this little remnant of the seed that would let this plant grow and sprout and flourish? What was left that was that thorny bush that couldn't be consumed? What was the sneh? What was this tiny bit that remained? Emunah. Chazal says that in the merit of Emunah, our fathers were redeemed from Egypt. Jews are called ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. Those with Emunah, the sons of those with Emunah. So what's Emunah? The worst translation in the universe is Emunah is faith. Eek. Because usually people are like blind faith. Emunah is not blind faith. Emunah is, ready for this, the experiential awareness that Hashem is the source of everything. That everything that happens is in His absolute control, and that He is taking care of you, and that you are never alone, ever. That is Emunah. The awareness that God has you. And the entire world. Enod milvado. Knowledge is when you're a kid, okay? You go to bed. You wake up in the middle of the night, and you start walking through your house, and you're scared. Because like you had a bad dream or something, like you heard like a sound outside. Knowledge is knowing that your parents are home and they will protect you. Emunah is the feeling of security that you have when you hear your parents breathing in the other room. It's the feeling that no matter what, I'm going to be okay. I am taken care of. Emunah is the root of the Jewish soul. Hidden deep, deep within us. It's this tiny part of us that remains no matter what. When everything else rots away, there is still Emunah. Even on the 49th level of Tumah, even on the 49th level of impurity, even when everything looks like we are totally gone, there's nothing left, Emunah remains. And from that tiny part, renewal and growth can come. See, this part, this bit of Emunah in a Jew can never be destroyed. It is a thorny bush that will not be consumed by anything, even an all-encompassing fire. And by showing Moshe this sight, Hashem was saying, don't look at the outside. This thorny bush should burn up in a minute. Bnei Israel should have given up in Egypt and completely disappeared. We should have assimilated. We should have completely disappeared in the tomb of Egypt. But the Netivot Shalom says it like this: Emunah is the root of our souls. And in the depths of our souls, we are always connected to Hashem. Whatever the outside looks like, the inside is pure and holy and connected. This bush, this thorny bush, is still here. And Bnei Israel are not consumed. They have Emunah. They may be very, very low right now. But the point we are hitting right now, Moshe, you should know, this is the point that the growth is going to happen. This is the point that the renewal is going to happen. This is the point where we can turn it all around. All they have to do is rely on that Emunah. They have to cry out to Hashem. They have to call out that they don't want to be where they are. They want to grow. They want to sprout. Bnei Israel cried out to Hashem from the lowest of the lows, and that's what started the wheels of redemption, right? They scream. They don't even have words. They can't even say anything. They just scream. They say, that's enough. Because they had the Emunah. They knew that Hashem was there. They knew that everything depended on him. When they scream, they hit the lowest level. They said, we cannot go any further. We want to grow. And that's when the Geulah starts. And that's when the redemption starts. That's when the growth starts. The seeds rotted. Let's start to grow. And that's why Hashem says to Moshe, you see this bush? It's not consumed. Take your shoes off your feet. Your shoes are your externals. Ignore what it looks like on the outside. Because I, Hashem, I see within. I see the soul. I see my children, my beloved children. I see their pure Emunah despite the fire raging around them. And the place that you stand, this is holy ground. This is holy ground. This is a holy people. This is my chosen nation. And what the Netivot Shalom continues and really brings this home for us is he says that the greater Geulah, it's the same for our personal Geulah. When a Jew feels the demands of his soul and feels the pang of conscience and feels like he isn't content in his current spiritual status, when he feels lost, when he feels disconnected, when he feels low, when he feels like he's in the 49th level of Tumah. But he starts to seek how to renew, how to grow. Even when he feels like he has no Emunah left. Even when he thinks he's, sure, I don't even have Emunah, I'm so lost. He has to know that deep down, Emunah is there. It's just covered up. He's a beloved child of Hashem. He's connected. And this moment where he feels so low is going to be the moment of renewal. It's going to be the moment of growth. That burning bush was on the 15th of Nisan. 1 year later to the day, Moshe marches Bnei Israel out of Egypt. And the greatest turnaround in history. And 50 days after that, on that exact same mountain where that burning bush was, we stood as a nation and we heard Hashem speak to us directly. We were so low, but the knowledge that Hashem was there, even when we were so low, turned the whole thing around. The word sneh, right, thorny bush, in Gematria is 115, which is the same Gematria of Zo Emunah. This is Emunah. Being at your lowest, having fire all around you, and not being consumed. How much would we change everything if we could see beyond the thorns? In ourselves, when we feel the most lowly, the most gone, the furthest of faith, the least holy, the biggest fakers, if we saw those moments instead of being in the deepest, darkest valley, but rather, I am a seed and this is my moment of growth. I am so low right now, but Hashem is with me and everything he does is for good and I am going to grow. What would it be and how would our world change if when we looked at another Jew, we stopped seeing the thorns? We stopped seeing the outside. We stopped seeing how different they look. And we rather see that despite the fact that we're in a burning fire of tumah in this world, their soul is not consumed. How would it change how we interact with unaffiliated Jews? If instead of seeing the thorns, instead of seeing the tumbleweed, we saw the holy spark of holy Kedusha, and we took our shoes off and we recognized that this is holy ground, and that sneh has not been consumed. This world is a hard place. You're still here, you're still fighting, you're not consumed. This is holy ground, get your shoes off. The root of Emunah is within all of us. The knowledge that Hashem is there is within all of us. No matter how lost we feel, no matter how dark it gets, no matter how far we feel like we've gone, the turnaround point is any minute. The sneh is not consumed. We will not be burnt up. We will never be lost. Moshe Rabbeinu had to see this before he took over leading this nation. He said, what you're going to see so many times that you think this is endgame. This sneh will not be consumed. This Emunah will not disappear. These are my beloved children. When they go the furthest from me, it's just the moment to spring them right back. It's like a rubber band. The further you pull it, the farther it launches. And that indeed is a wondrous sight to see. That is indeed something worth turning aside and stopping and looking at from different angles. Looking at ourselves in the mirror, and instead of seeing the lowly, look at a strong bush, a strong, thorny little tumbleweed that we are, that no matter how hard you try, you cannot burn us. No matter how hard you try, we will not be consumed. This world cannot touch us. We have Emunah. We have strength within us. This is just the moment of renewal. And B'ezrat Hashem, this will be this lowliness that we're in, this darkness that we're in, this crazy world that is going on around us right now, this loss that we feel. God willing, this is it. This is the last little bitterot. And the Geula Shlema, and the merit of our Emunah, and in the merit of our connection with our God, and in the merit of the love that God has for us, the love that Hashem has for his children, the Geula Shlema will begin B'mehera b'yameinu, and we all say, Amen.